This is Eric with Mother.com. After the close of the first trading week for September 2019, markets were mixed. We can see that the Dow was up slightly, S&P 500 unchanged, Nasdaq down slightly, VIX was down about 8%, and we'll take a look at gold later, which was down about 0.7% after yesterday's, I believe, 2% down day. All right, let's begin here by taking a look at the S&P 500 on the weekly, and really no surprise that the market had a, let's call it a decent week, about 1.8% higher for the S&P 500 for this past week, which makes sense, is consistent with our previous observation from the previous week, where we had seen that the market had come back to test the RSI 50. This line was holding, and as long as we have that bounce back above RSI 50, we can anticipate a market that is net looking like it is stabilizing, if not actually pointing higher. Now, of course, visually we're talking about this also being an example of what happens when you have uniform activity support at the RSI 50 level, just like we did here. Ultimately, what happened is we would go on to test previous highs. Actually, not only did we test previous highs, we ended up improving on those highs. So now the market has brought back the equation, or the possibility, that it might actually have to go back to test the recent highs on a weekly closing basis for the S&P 500, or might actually even improve on those highs. Again, as long as we are holding this RSI 50 on the weekly, that is back on the table. So now the question we are going to ask ourselves as we go into a new week is whether the S&P 500 is going to be responding to the RSI topside resistance line. If we draw it from the highs of the RSI in 2008, should be something like that. So this line is pretty much within distance, and so what happens here in the new week should determine direction. What the bulls want to see is the market moving above that line to advance this market higher and potentially attack this recent all-time weekly closing high. If the market can reach there, if it reaches there, when it reaches there, we can see what happens when we get there. If we get there, a breakout is what the bulls want to see ultimately. So again, the question is this line going to hold and stop the S&P 500 from moving higher? In other words, if we end up seeing resistance here and the market coiling down, then we might start thinking about the possibility of the market being back to where it was over the last couple of weeks, which, by the way, for all intents and purposes, the market's been trading in this range here for about, call it 4 to 5 weeks. So this week we popped above that range, which is what the bulls wanted to see. Now, if we end up seeing resistance of the RSI here, it might be that all the market would be doing is coming back and trading within that box. So really we'll see what happens in the new week, whether we do eventually move above this blue line, or if the market does eventually stall around this RSI topside potential resistance line. Now, keep in mind, the last time we came to that level, the market did stall. We had a double top rejection here for the highs there. Of course, we saw that at the time, and once that was confirmed, it was suggesting that more than likely the market was going to be pointing down, which is exactly what happened here.